everyone. Thank you so much for joining me again. Today I want to talk to you about something that usually makes pastors feel a little bit uncomfortable, and that's money. Yeah, that's right. We're going to talk about money because so many people avoid this conversation for not wanting to feel awkward and not wanting to make anyone feel uncomfortable. But you need to learn to have healthy and good conversations about money. And so the first thing I want to talk to you today about is remuneration. That is to say, how much are you going to make in return for the amount of work you're putting in? See, a lot of times we're not told that it is okay for us to negotiate how much we're going to make. See, in ministry, a lot of people are used to saying, well, it's for the Lord, and so we do everything sacrificially, and this is true. But if ministry is going to be your sole source of income, if you are 100% vocational ministry, then you need to ensure that the amount of money that you're making is sufficient for you to survive, for you to have a home, for you to eat, for you to raise a family. You need to ensure that the job you're signing up for is going to compensate you fairly so that you don't feel taken advantage of. These things matter. You have just done a 4-year degree if you did a bachelor's, or even longer if you did a master's in theology. Bible college and seminary is expensive. You might have things to repay. Either way, you're entering a professional career. And a lot of times we don't think about ministry as a job, right? We only talk about it as ministry, as service to the Lord. But it is a job. And like every other job, you need to ensure that in a professional setting, you are being compensated fairly for the work that you're putting in. And another thing you have to consider is that unless your church experiences exponential growth, which may happen, praise the Lord, it might happen. But that's rarely the case. And unless your church experiences that, you're not going to see a big raise or a change in your income in the time that you're there. At least nothing significant enough to actually affect your quality of life. And so whatever it is that you sign onto in your original contract, you can expect that that's the amount you're going to be making for a long time. So you need to ensure that that is okay for you. That is enough for you to raise a family. That is enough for you to provide for your home. And usually, if you're a young pastor, you're just getting started, usually you're moving to wherever this church is located, wherever they hire you from. Now, you need to consider that as well. See, let's take a round number, let's say $40,000 for a full-time job. $40,000 in one location. Right now, I'm in Canada, so one location in Canada, let's say, if you're in Newfoundland or if you're in PEI, $40,000 will go a lot further than if you're downtown Toronto, or if you're in Mississauga, or on the other coast, if you're in Vancouver, where $40,000 isn't going to go very far because the cost of living is significantly higher. And so you need to consider not just the amount, but is that amount suitable for where you're living? Again, we're not trying to make a whole bunch of wealth here, but we are trying to be fair and good stewards. We are trying to be wise with our jobs, with our time, and with our resources, specifically your energy levels, which leads me to my second point. If your contract is for 40 hours, or if your contract is for 50 hours, please stick to 40 hours and stick to 50 hours. There's going to be a tendency and a pressure and even an overarching taboo there that you, because it's for the Lord and because it's for the kingdom, you need to sacrifice all your time. Well, that's not true, and it's not even biblical, and it's not healthy. And so there's going to be this tendency there and this pressure that you sign for 40, but we're going to get 60 hours or even 70 or maybe even 80 hours. You would never work 80 hours in any corporate job, any other professional career, and only receive 40 hours worth of income. It would never happen. And ministry doesn't pay overtime. It is salary based. So you need to understand that you don't overwork yourself, so that you can have, again, contentment, longevity, good energy, so that those 40 to 50 hours are 40 to 50 great, excellent hours, high quality ability. Now, I understand that unlike other jobs, you don't clock out of ministry. You need to know that going in. Okay, it's not like any other job where you just time out and don't have to worry about it, you'll deal with it tomorrow. Tragedies happen. Okay, people do go through crisis. There is need for ministry and pastors at the wee hours of the morning. There will be hospital visitations. There will be getting called to prison. There will be many things where you go to love and serve people outside of standard office hours. So you also need to consider that when negotiating your weekly hour requirements, because that is a reality. It is a constant occurrence in the ministry. And if you're not careful, that's going to quickly pile up and take over all the rest of your time. Office hours plus counseling hours plus ministry prep hours plus sermon prep hours, now visitation hours, all these things add up. And so please use it as something to keep you accountable. If your contract is 40 to 50 hours, work 40 to 50 hours. Especially if you're married or you have kids, don't make your wife or your husband, don't make your spouse or your children compete with the church. You're called to your family first. And so by setting those guidelines there, it helps the other areas of your life. Also use that contract as a way to protect yourself. If the church has agreed to give you compensation for 50 or 40 hours, only work 50 or 40 hours. One-offs, that's fine, that happens. Every one of us has to put in a few more hours every now and then. But don't make it a regular thing. You're just going to waste away. And soon enough, you're going to feel taken advantage of, and it's going to affect how you serve the very community you're called to love. So sticking to a set amount of hours that is discussed ahead of time is very important. Third, you want to think about secondary source of income. Maybe you're only going to work part-time in the ministry and then part-time doing something else. And maybe that will give you a better source of income. Many churches can't afford to pay a high amount, or at least what you would call a standard amount. They just can't. They're too small. And that's okay. That's okay. But then go part-time. But remember, if you're going to go part-time in ministry and you're going to get part-time pay, they're going to get part-time hours. It's all about balance, and that's okay. It is okay to set that expectation. You must be fair to yourself and steward well your energy and your time. All right, so secondary income. Maybe you do work full-time in ministry. And praise God for that. It is a privilege, it is a joy to be able to work full-time to serve the Lord. But sometimes that still just isn't enough in this day and age. Especially for us who are just younger, for those of you who are starting off, it's going to be very difficult. And so maybe start to think about other ways to subsidize that income, other ways to garner that. Also, if you're a young couple, maybe recently married, and you enter the ministry, chances are one of you got the job. Chances are one of you has been hired as the pastor. I know a lot of churches love the 2-for-1 combo. It is so common. If you hired the pastor, you hired the pastor's wife, or you hired the pastor's husband. And so you get the spouse too. Yes, you get the spouse in as far as they're going to love the whole church together. They're going to serve. But the spouse is called to take care of their husband or their wife, not the church first. And so make sure that if you're only getting one income, only one of you is putting in all their time into the church. Do things out of love for sure, but be wise in how you steward your time. It is okay. This is okay. It is not bad. It is not selfish. It is not greedy. You must take care of yourself. And so discussing finances up front is a very healthy way to establish these parameters so that no one burns out and that everything is clear from the get-go. And my last point when it comes to money is you want to understand budgets. Not just personal budgets. It's always good and very helpful for you to understand how to manage your own finances. But I mean church budgets. And they don't teach this in any seminary, at least none that I've researched. They don't teach this in Bible college. But you're going to sit there in board meetings or council meetings or annual church business meetings, membership meetings, whatever you call them. You're going to sit there and you're going to see a bunch of numbers. And these numbers are going to tell you all about the church's costs or expenses, whether it's the mortgage, the electricity, all these outputs, whether they're giving to missions, whether they're giving to outreach, all these things. It's also going to tell you how much the church is receiving. It's going to let you see snapshots in how the church is doing. And you need to be able to speak to these things from a place of information, a place of wisdom. And a lot of us think, well, we're not the lead pastor, so that really doesn't affect us. But that's wrong. It does. And if you're ever going to move forward with your church and help them navigate these things, it is important for you to understand where they're at. Not to mention that trends actually have very clear pastoral implications. It does actually tell you about the heart of your church. For instance, usually the church's budget is largest where their heart is greatest. So if a church is really big on missions, they're going to have a large missions budget. If a church is really big on outreach, they're going to have a large outreach budget. And if they have a very tiny one in those areas, it tells you where they're at in those things. It tells you where their thinking is. And that maybe will affect how you minister. Maybe it will affect the kind of conversations you're having to have. Maybe it'll affect promptings and how you can help them see that maybe other things are important. I mean, if your AV department is getting 80% of your income, but you're doing nothing to love the homeless or nothing to love those within the church who are struggling, or you're not, these are the kind of things you need to know. So just understanding how to manage a budget from a church perspective is going to help you a lot, not just in dialogue in business meetings, but also pastorally. It'll give you a snapshot to the heart of your people. So these are things you want to know. And it is okay to talk about money in this way. There's no reason to feel awkward, uncomfortable, or to fear these conversations. You need to do these things. So again, just in wrap up, one, negotiate remuneration. That is, discuss a fair compensation for the amount of work you're going to put in. Something that works for you and works for your setting and will work for your setting for the foreseeable future. Two, discuss very clearly how many hours you're going to work. Are there certain things expected in terms of office hours versus visitation hours versus mentoring or studying? Talk about these things and stick to it. Stick to the amount of hours that your contract says for the sake of loving your church well and loving yourself and your spouse and your family so that no one feels like anyone is getting taken advantage of. Three, consider a secondary source of income. It is going to be necessary. Most of us pastor in churches under 2,000 people. And so these churches usually cannot afford to give you large salaries. And so you need to understand, of course, a pastor doesn't get into the ministry for the income. We get into it for the outcome or for the service to the Lord. Yes, we do it from a love. But at the same time, we need to survive. We too need to move forward with our families. And so you need to consider another way to subsidize what you're making and what you're earning in your ministry setting. And fourth, understand budgets. Take the time, have someone explain it to you, have someone sit down and walk you through these things so you understand how budgets work, how you can plan ministry needs around them, and then we can move forward in conversations with our church and with our board so that we can speak from a place of intelligence and have an overall understanding of where the church is going and how we're doing. So I really recommend these things for you. I wish someone would have told me this when I first started, because you know what? It is crucial for you to understand. You're in this for the long haul. Ideally, you want to serve the rest of your life. And one of the things that's going to free you up to do that without angst, without worries, without issues, is to be financially free to do that. And in order to do that, you have to ensure that you are receiving fair compensation for the amount of work and education that you have, like you would expect in any other professional job. And in order to do this well, you need to manage yourself, your time, in accordance to the amount of money you're making. You don't get paid overtime in ministry. And so ensure that the amount of hours you're working is actually what you're going to be compensated for. This is in everyone's best interest, because then the pastor always feels good, doesn't feel taken advantage of, feels fairly compensated, and is therefore more motivated to continue to serve. You'd rather get 40 or 50 amazing high quality hours than 80 constant hours of someone who's dwindling and being drained. Well, I truly hope this has been a source of encouragement and blessing for you. I pray that you'll take this advice and actually heed it. If you know anyone who needs to hear this, maybe someone who is wrestling with this, wanting to have this conversation with the church board but doesn't really know how to go about it, or maybe just needs that extra push to know that it's okay to have these conversations, please share this with someone. Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it. I'll see you later.